Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Welcome to my channel. My name is Hebah and this is Hebah's Rollercoaster. And before starting with today's video, I'd like to ask you for some love and to like this video, to comment, to subscribe to my channel, because all of those things help me out a lot. So thank you in advance, and let's get started. Today's video was motivated by my little cousin and by one of my followers on Instagram who both want to learn a new language. They both asked me for some tips on how to get started when you want to learn a new language. So shout out to these two for wanting to learn a new language and for giving me the motivation to make this video today. Now, as you can see by the title of this video, I'm not just going to give you a list of tips that you should follow, but we will be talking about how to get going when you want to learn a new language. And there's so many things that I would like to say about this topic. And because I know that I can't really talk about everything in just one video, I will try and make several videos where I talk about specific aspects linked to language learning, because it's not a one-size-fits-all kind of thing. It's very different for each individual. So because we are all so different, and because each human being is different in their way of learning and in their way of doing things in general, what I will try to do is to help you find the way that helps you the most and that works for you and your character the most. So in today's video, I will be talking about the very first thing that you should put your energy into when you want to learn a new language. I believe that this is probably the most important thing, but it's also the most neglected thing when it comes to learning a new language. And that is that you need to find out what kind of a learner type you are. Oftentimes, when a person decides that they want to learn a new language, they just dive right into it and get started without really having a plan, without really knowing which material to use or which approach to use. So what we'll be doing today in this video is we will be talking about the different learner types that we distinguish, and then we will look at different learning strategies that work for these learner types. Because jumping right into it might result in you feeling overwhelmed or chaotic and unorganized, and eventually it might also result in you just giving up altogether. So finding out beforehand what kind of a learner type you are will help you to plan your learning process according to your specific learning needs and abilities. It will also help you find out which languages are actually easier to learn for someone like you. And even if you are a different learner type, you can still look at other learner types and learn their learning strategies in order to be able to learn a language. Wait a sec. Before I present to you the learner types and which languages they can learn, just let me say that usually we aren't really just one learner type. Most people are a mixture of learner types, and what's really great about these learner types is that you can actually look at other types of learners and look at their learning strategies and adapt them even if you aren't that kind of a learner. Okay, I said the word learn like 20 times so far, but get used to it. It will be used a lot in today's video. So knowing about the kinds of learner types there are, knowing which kind of a learner you are, can help you choose the language that's easiest to learn for you. And even if you do want to learn a language that might not be as easy for your type of learner, you can still look at other kinds of learners and at their learning strategies to adapt them and adopt them to your own needs. So let's have a closer look at each of the learner types and at the learning strategies that fit each of these types. It is important that you know that we distinguish between 4 different learner types: the visual learner type, the auditory learner type, the verbal learner type, and the kinesthetic learner type. And we will discuss each of them right now. As the name already gives it away, the visual learner type is very visual. So these people need images or any kind of visual input to process and learn new information. Visual learners focus a lot on things that they can see, and that is why it is much easier for them to remember things that they have a visual concept of, so things that they have seen. A couple of questions for you. Do you often find yourself drawing as you're trying to remember information? Do you often try to visualize information in your mind? Is it easy for you to remember what a graph or a diagram looks like? If your answer to all of these questions is yes, then you are probably a visual learner. So what does that mean for language learning? It means that anything you try to remember, anything you try to memorize, always needs to have a visual input, a visual aspect to it.
For example, instead of listening to a podcast, watch a video. If the video has subtitles, that's even better because it adds another visual aspect together with the images of the video. If you want to listen to audiobooks to practice your language skills, make sure you also have a written version of the book, either as a printed version or an ebook. If you want to use vocabulary flashcards, draw pictures instead of just writing the definition.
Implementing all of those tips will enable you to have a visual image whenever you are learning a new language or a new language item. Oh, and great news! Apparently, it is much easier for visual learners to learn so-called logographic languages. So these are languages that use images and pictures instead of letters to represent words. So one example could be Chinese, for example. However, this does not mean that only visual learners can learn Chinese. It only means that they have a bit of an easier time doing so. If you are not a visual learner, but you want to learn a logographic language, such as Chinese, you can look at these strategies and try to adopt them into your language learning journey to learn these kinds of languages. The second learner type is the so-called auditory learner type. While visual learners focus a lot on the things that they can see, auditory learners focus on what they can hear. If you are someone who talks to themselves a lot as they're studying, if you're someone that learns a lot by just listening to podcasts and music, if it's really easy for you to remember song lyrics, for example, then you probably are an auditory learner type. And these are the things that you can do in order to learn a new language.
Listen to podcasts, audiobooks, or music as often and as much as possible. For example, while commuting to work or school, or while doing housework such as cooking. As an auditory learner, it is also extremely important that you talk. Have conversations with people in your target language as much as possible, whenever possible, wherever possible.
And I know how it is. Sometimes we might feel self-conscious or insecure or shy to speak in a language that we don't really speak that well. Then it is particularly important to overcome that fear and to become more courageous and to just speak. And believe me, usually people are very understanding and very patient because they appreciate your efforts to speak their language. However, if you feel like you're still too shy, if you feel like you can't really do that, you can't overcome that fear yet, one tip that I can give you is that you just listen to music as much as possible, several times even, repeatedly, listen to podcasts repeatedly, and just try to repeat them to yourself and to speak along. Auditory learners pick up tones and intonation very easily, so for them it's actually much easier to learn a tonal language, which are languages that focus a lot on tone and sound and intonation. So one example would again be Chinese or Mandarin, which has several tones. If you are an auditory learner type, or if you want to learn in an auditory way, one tip that I would give you is that you should try and learn a language that sounds completely different from your own language. For example, if your first language is English or German, you could consider learning something like Turkish or Arabic or Chinese, which all sound very different from English and German. And again, even if you aren't an auditory learner, you could still use auditory learning strategies to learn these languages that sound very different to your own language. These strategies will definitely help you to pick up the intonation and the different sounds and tones of that language. Verbal learners are often also referred to as linguistic learners. They learn very easily through writing or typing. If you're somebody that takes lots of notes, if you're someone that likes writing things down, or if it's easier for you to remember things when you write them down, then you probably are a verbal or linguistic learner.
As a verbal learner, you really want to focus on writing things down. Let's say you're reading a book, for example. Whenever you come across a vocabulary item or a grammatical construction that's unfamiliar to you, write them down. You could also create post-it notes with vocabulary that you find interesting or difficult. Place them around your home, and as you pass them, repeat them out loud.
So apparently verbal learning strategies are particularly good for learning languages that are considered poetic, such as Arabic, for example, and it's also said that it's much easier for verbal or linguistic learners to learn languages like German or French, because these languages are considered languages of philosophy. They have a very rich vocabulary and they put lots of emphasis on their writing style. But as I told you before, even if you aren't a verbal learner, you can still use these strategies to learn one of these languages. It is known of kinesthetic learners that they have a really hard time to sit still. They learn through motion, through moving around, and they use their hands a lot and use lots of gestures. For me, one of the most obvious signs of a kinesthetic learner is that they walk around a lot when they're trying to memorize or recall certain information. And I'm sure some of you do that as well. If you are a kinesthetic learner, or if you want to use a kinesthetic learning approach, it is really important that you diversify your learning methods and your learning materials.
For example, you can create your own study materials and language games. Another tip could be to move around when you're studying. This could be either walking around in a room, or again, while commuting, just listen to an audio lecture or lesson.
Kinesthetic learning focuses a lot on using your body and your hands to communicate. So if you are somebody who already naturally moves around a lot, it can be much easier for you to learn a language such as sign language, for example. Generally speaking, as kinesthetic learners really enjoy moving, this also includes traveling. So for you, if you are a kinesthetic learner, it can actually make lots of sense to learn a language that's spoken in many different countries, because that will give you an opportunity to travel to all of these countries. So languages like English, French, Arabic, Chinese, Russian, these are spoken in many different parts of the world, so it will also give you the possibility to move around and travel around the world practicing these languages. There you have it, guys, the 4 different learner types, the different learning strategies they use, as well as different languages that fit each of these types. If you are a specific learner type and already use specific learning strategies, it will make lots of sense for you to pick one of the languages that I mentioned, where these learning strategies can actually be very beneficial and helpful. However, even if you aren't a specific learner type, or even if you want to learn a language that doesn't really fit your specific learner type, you can still look at other learner types and adopt their learning strategies and use them for yourself. If you want some more information about your specific learner type, or if you want some more help with finding your specific learner type, I will put some helpful links in the description box below, so go check them out, and I hope this will help you out. So guys, this was it for today's video. If you liked it, please give it a thumbs up, and if you have any ideas, comments, feedback, let me know in the comments below, or you can also just write me a private message on Instagram. Don't forget to like and to subscribe. As I said, this really helps this channel to grow. I'm planning on doing more language learning related videos in the future, inshallah. You will find all of those videos in this playlist right here. Other than that, take care, and I will see you on Monday with another video. Assalamu alaikum.